think if you want to test it.
And, yep, okay.
And it's okay for them to ask questions throughout.
Oh, yeah, you did. Minutes? Yeah. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. I thought we did.
I can find.
What was in that copy? My gosh. Missy.
Okay, so I'll do my intro and I'll pull your slides up, and then Rachel's gonna be on hand to switch over to your slides. And also, and then we have them printed out copies of each of your slides, so I'll let them know that we have those.
Okay.
I think especially for yours, Lori, like in case like somebody's like trying to read it, you can say like, we have a printout.
Right, but I'm also, I mean, my point is this, I'm just going to want to emphasize this is for the graphs, so I hope they don't.
Try to read every word.
I did, it sort of pulled your pants in. Okay, it's an added feature to the presentation. Okay. All right, well, I'm gonna just sit down. You're gonna introduce us one at a time?
I'm gonna introduce you both, and then
Okay, so we'll just stand here for a minute, and then I'll go sit down when you talk. Yes, you did good.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for braving the construction out front. I wasn't sure what that was going to look like, but here we are. Thank you for being here today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is James Woodward. I'm with the Goodwin Living Foundation, and we're happy to present today's seminar, and glad that you could join us for it. And of course, we're very grateful to our two speakers today, Kim Fisk and Lori Blackburn, and I'll tell you a little bit about them in just a moment. But the foundation hosts a few educational seminars each year on topics that we think might be useful and of interest to you. Based on a number of conversations and inquiries that we've received over the last few months, we thought that today's presentation, Finding Peace of Mind in Uncertain Times, may be particularly topical for many of us. So we hope that the next hour will be able to share knowledge and hear your questions, ideas, and insights. And one thing I do want to point out, and thank you to Stefan for helping us with this, but we are recording today's presentation and live streaming it to some residents over at the View Alexandria. So I just wanted to make you all aware of that. Mary Kate, who's in the back, and I will have handheld microphones, and we will bring those around. If anyone has questions, Lori and Kim have both said that they would welcome them throughout the presentation. So as you have a question, please raise your hand. We'll bring you a microphone, and then you feel free to ask that. And the other thing I would say is if you have any questions related to your personal financial planning, maybe hold off on those and see if you can talk to Kim or Lori separately afterwards, and they can respond at that time. But I'll say it's been a pleasure getting to know both of our speakers over the last few years. They both serve on the Goodwin Living Foundation Board of Directors and do tremendous work for the foundation, so I'm very appreciative for them coming out today. And they're also coming tomorrow to present at Goodwin House Alexandria, so double thank you. Lori Blackburn is a managing director at Riverfront Wealth Advisors. A certified financial planner, Lori focuses her practice on helping individuals and businesses develop, implement, and evaluate individual investment plans. She also advises local foundations and endowments on the management of their investment assets. Lori lives in the Mount Vernon area of Alexandria and has served on a number of community boards in the area. Kim Fisk is a partner with Fisk Law Group and focuses her law practice in estate planning and trust and estate administration. Her office is located in Old Town Alexandria, and in addition to her dedication to the law practice and to the foundation, she's also one of the biggest Washington National fans that I've ever come across. So with those introductions, let's dive right in, and I'll welcome Lori on up.
First test of the day, unmuting the microphone. Excellent. Success. Good morning, everyone. Please let me know if there's ever a time when I'm turning away or you can't hear what I'm talking about. But yes, my name is Lori Blackburn. I've been on the Goodwin House Foundation board for a number of years. My mom was a Goodwin House resident, and I have many, many clients who are Goodwin House residents. So when we were talking about what kind of discussion we might want to have today, it came to our attention that there are uncertain times this year, and that it has caused some people some tension. Would you agree with that proposition? A lot of things are happening, go in different directions, and it has people worried. And so what I noticed, particularly in April, excuse me, when there was so much volatility in the market, I noticed a level of anxiety, uncertainty, and fear that felt more like 2008. But at that point, and any point in this year, the market has not been down any more than it was in 2022. It's been down less than 2022. But the level of fear felt more like 2008. Maybe you agree, but that's just my experience from phone calls with clients. And I think part of that is local, the Doge stuff happening right at the beginning, and there's not anybody in this room who doesn't know people who have families who were affected by job cuts or potential job cuts, or what's going to happen to their pensions. So there was a lot of whole bunch of people who had individual angst, right? And it kind of turned to collective in this area. That's part of it. But it's also just that, people feel much more uncertain about the direction and the procedures for policy making. And so people have kind of more of a feeling that they're not sure what's going to happen next. Would you agree with that? Okay. And obviously, as a result, some of that is reflected in the market, because when we're not sure what's going to happen with tariffs, then if we don't know what the tariff policy is, then we don't know what the impact of the tariff policy is, and then we can't predict what's going to happen with all the companies and all the individuals and all the families. So it's that kind of uncertainty that creates this anxiety that I think is at a high level, and that's kind of why we want to have this discussion. But this is the exact type of scenario that helps investors succumb to what I would call emotional investing. There's a whole there's a whole area of behavioral finance, right, where we talk about why investors make the decisions that they make. We want our financial decisions to be driven by whatever our long-term plan is, right? But at times like this, it doesn't always end up that way. It's easy for people to succumb to classic biases, because for most of us, money is one of the things that keeps us safe, right? It feels like it keeps us and our families safe. So if we're threatened with the loss of money, we feel like we're losing safety. We're not in any physical danger, particularly those of us in this room and in this area, right? We're in less physical danger. But you can't control the other things that are uncertain out there, and you can sit there and worry about your money, right? So that's kind of where we put our energy. And that leads to emotional investing decisions. They just kind of appeal to us almost instinctively, so that we are more inclined to forget about the logical long-term decisions we've made and respond to momentary fears and reactions. They don't do a lot of PowerPoint presentations anymore, so what I've had to do is get reports that include graphs that I want to show you. And what this graph shows, one of these reports is done by a group called American Funds. They're a mutual fund company. The other group is done by Wells Fargo. I'm not incentivized in any way to talk about products of either of those folks. So this is just purely who has good material I can use. This graph at the bottom talks about market declines. And the market declines by 5% or more on an average of twice a year. Okay, so that should be something we're very familiar with. It declines 10% or more about once every 18 months. That's known as a market correction. So that's where we, got to certainly this year was market correction, but that is not an infrequent occurrence. It declines by 15% or more about once every 3 years. And a bear market is minus 20%. The market declines by 20% or more about once every 6 years. So again, all of us in this room have lived many, many decades and gone through many, many bear markets. But they all kind of feel a little bit different, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute too. The average length of a 20% down bear market is 402 days. And the last time it occurred was January 2022. So just, again, a couple of years ago. So bear markets are not unusual. They're not unheard of. 10% declines are not infrequent, but they feel like it, right? Kim and I were talking about this, having coffee, that, this feels unprecedented. This feels like it's something we've never been through before, and it is, but so was COVID. That was pretty unprecedented, right? And so was 2008, and so was, in the very beginning of my profession, the dot-com bubble and bust. I don't know if people were actively investing, but that was, I was in the business maybe 3 years. People bought these dot-com investments, so you'd have your growth fund, you'd have your tech fund, and then you'd have your individual stock shares in Microsoft, Oracle, and Intel, right? Does this ring bells for anybody? So you're loaded up on technology because we get in the bubble of thinking, this time is different. Everything's going to change. And then the bubble bursts, and a lot of money is lost. And I remember then talking about this excess bandwidth capacity, right? That it's going to take decades to work out that excess bandwidth capacity. Well, decades have gone by, right? I mean, it happened. So all these things that truly are unprecedented truly do work out. And what we know is that in the meantime, markets go up. This graph shows the S&P 500 rolling 10-year average annual returns. So it goes up and down, but the overall, the overall movement is up. And not only that, a couple of these graphs, I'm putting them in there to, again, if we want to appeal to the logic to kind of demonstrate if we succumb to that protective impulse we have. Because what clients do, the call I'll get is, do you think maybe we should just, move to bonds until things settle down? Doesn't that sound reasonable? Doesn't that sound like you're just protecting yourself when you do that? But if you do that, what have you really done? The market's down. You want to protect yourself, so you're selling when the market's down. That's called selling low. And then you're going to wait until things feel more stable and you feel safe again, and you're going to buy back in. That's called buying high. So that's exactly what you don't want to be doing, but that's the protective impulse that we're trying not to succumb to. Because again, over longer periods of time, and particularly right after that decline that just scared the heck out of you, markets go up. Sometimes the bear market is long, sometimes it's short, but they've all ended so far. And that's just kind of the, markets at the top, price high, and then when it starts to go down, then you have the emotional reactions. But what I really want to show you, these are the Wells Fargo graphs. Market timing is difficult. So the average equity fund investor over this particular period of time made 6.8%, while the S&P made 9.65%. Now, why would that be? Why would the average equity investor make less than the S&P? Because they market timed. And I don't know, I mean, I'm 29 years in this business now, and I could, no matter what level of genius you think you have, which being in this business a couple years, disabuses you of the notion that you have any genius, but no matter what level of genius you think you have, about 1% of people can market time, okay? It's not something that is a good strategy. So the rest of us just underperform the S&P, right? And so whoops, hold on, I went the wrong way. There we go. Missing the best days of the market. Well, actually, I will show you this graph first. This is ridiculous to read, but those rectangles there, they're showing you the narrow band between bad performance and good performance. You know, once markets start to recover, it's a really narrow number of days where market recovery starts, right? And if you miss that market recovery, you know, a market that's going to give you 8%, if you miss the 10 best days, you're down to 5.26. If you miss the 20 best days, you're down to 3.41 return, right? That's a huge, and that's why there's that differential between what the market does, what the S&P does, and what the investor does. Because they're waiting until it feels safe, and they miss that return that happens in those really narrow bands. Does that make sense? You know, we keep statistics over this, and it has been, you know, consistently true. There's a group called Dalbar that started doing these surveys, I think it was in the late 70s. And that's just, it's been true since they started doing this research. Let's see if I got all of this here. So I guess, you know, I think the long-term plan is really the best way to get through. Either, you know, you're working with an advisor or you've been doing this and are experienced, and so you've decided kind of what your risk tolerance is, and that's something that should stay pretty stable, right? As we get older, our risk tolerance declines to a degree, but it shouldn't be, it cannot be reactive to the market, okay? It can't be, I am very risk tolerant in good markets and I'm very conservative in bad markets, right? That's you know, another way to lose money. But it should be, you know, smooth anyway. If your risk tolerance goes down and you feel like being a little bit more conservative, that's okay, as long as it happens over time and in response to your life and not in response to the market. The other thing I would say about your long-term planning, if I learned nothing else in the 2008-2009 market, it's that cash is king. So that you always want to make sure that you have enough cash for, you know, your needs for the next year or so, maybe beyond that, because, you know, markets will come back up, but having to sell a lot of money in a down market is very painful, right? And one, you know, I've talked about clients having fear that I think is totally understandable, but one way to kind of respect that fear is to have more talks about cash. How much cash do you have? What expenses might come up? What about unexpected expenses? What if we made a little more cash available? So you feel like you're increasing your margin of safety, but you're not really changing your investment plan a lot. And it's not, you know, particularly when money market rates, you know, certainly some of the institutional money market rates are pretty good these days. It's not a bad thing to maybe add a little bit to your cash if that's what makes you feel secure so that you don't make other investment decisions that might, in retrospect, look unwise. Does that make sense to everybody? Kim is going to go ahead and also talk to you for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we're going to take any questions unless there's anything very pressing someone needs to ask right now. But otherwise, we'll be available to kind of have a bigger discussion about this. Thank you very much for your attention.
And just one thing I'll add, we do have printouts of both presentations. We have a limited number, so if you don't get one on your way out and you're interested, let me know. I'm happy to email or print out a copy for you. So I just wanted to mention that.
All right, let me get set up here. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's so great to see you. I have to tell you that my husband and I work with Lori, and I was one of those people that was reactive to the market, and I called Lori, and I didn't say, let's go to bonds. I said, let's sell everything. I'm so scared. And Lori was very patient. She had the same talk with me, and we talked about cash, and so now I'm putting money in cash. But my husband is 81 years old this year, And I think that's where my fear comes from. I'm really worried. He's 81. He's going to have some health issues, and I'm going to need cash, and I'm just really worried that I'll need money when the market's down, and what'll I do? But all of these statistics and these numbers have really helped me feel calm. And again, Lori's talked me into, has advised me that I should have about a year's worth of expenses in cash. And so I've been doing that. And now I'm feeling much better. I wouldn't say 100%, but I will tell you this. One of the days I talked with her when I said, sell everything, about 2 days later, the market went way up. And Lori was so gracious, she didn't call me and say, I told you so. She could have. And it would have been, accurate, but she's right. And it's just so great to talk with her. And if you guys have any questions, I'm going to say, give her a call, and she'll talk with you individually. I think you'll feel really a whole lot better after that. But I'm going to talk with you about legal documents. Does anyone have a question before I get started? Someone has a question. Do you have a question? Anyone? No? Okay. So in order to get peace of mind from a lawyer's point of view, I'm going to say, make sure your legal documents are up to date. And I could stop right there. But sometimes people say, well, what are my legal documents? What am I talking about when I say that? And so legal documents, I'm talking about documents that help you during your lifetime. And those are powers of attorney. General power of attorney is generally financial. And then a medical power of attorney, which we call the advanced medical directive. And then the legal documents that help your family or your heirs after you're gone. And that would be your will or your trust. And your beneficiary designations. So during this time to have peace of mind, we need to make sure that these documents are in order. So what's a power of attorney? You guys, do you all have powers of attorney? Yeah, so you know. So you name an agent to make decisions for you or to help you out if you're unable to do the work yourself, or maybe you're on vacation or something. And we have financial and we have medical. So the things your agent can do are access your bank accounts, buy and sell real estate, sign your tax return. That is so important. We really do a lot of that. Change your mailing address. I do that all the time when I serve as power of attorney. If someone has taken ill and they're going to be like in a rehab center for a month, I go down to the post office with my power of attorney and change the address so the mail comes to me for that month. Your agent can talk with government agencies, insurance companies. Have you ever had any trouble with your power of attorney, with anyone accepting your power of attorney? Yes, right. Has it been banks? Yes. Banks. Banks, I don't know what it is. I used to work with a bank. But now the banks are getting really, really cautious about powers of attorney. And so one of the things that I advise on that is if you have a power of attorney, that you go down to the bank and you give it to the bank. Oftentimes, your agent is the one who's presenting the power of attorney to the bank, and that's when the bank gets a little difficult. Has anyone tried to take their own power of attorney and had some issues? No. So I think the bank is nervous when the agent shows up and says, hey, I'm the agent for Lori, and here, take this piece of paper, and now I'm going to write checks. And they get really nervous and they ask a lot of questions. They send it down to their legal department. And sometimes they say, no, you can't do that. So that's a bit of a problem. So if you have your own power of attorney and you take it to your own bank or your own investment advisor and say, hey, I'm telling you that if I can't do things, then I want Lori or whoever I've named as agent to do that. And I think that that's a good way to allow them to accept your power of attorney. I think that's a good way to work with your banks. You have to understand that your agent has the power to take your assets. So you have to choose who you're naming as agent. You have to choose wisely. So you want to have someone who's mature, someone who doesn't have financial issues, someone who understands finances. And you always should name a successor agent in case your first agent is unable to act. And does everyone have a medical directive? I think Goodwin House asks you to do that, right? The medical directives have come a long way. Before, it was just what happens if I'm in a coma or something. But now there's two different situations. So you can talk about how you want to have treatment if you're in a non-terminal situation, and then if you're in a terminal condition. You can find the forms online, you can get them from your doctor or your internet, and they follow state law. So here's some tips. Ask your agent before you, I see a question.
Well, I'm here, but my power of attorney, the person is my health director and all that, is in Massachusetts. So what has to be followed is here from Virginia, right? Not Massachusetts.
That's true. Yes, that's right. So it's your agent, so it's your activities and everything that's going to be Virginia law.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which she doesn't know. That's something.
But that's okay. Uh-huh. So ask your agent before you appoint them. I have clients that come in and say, well, I'm going to name Susie. I haven't talked with her, but I'm just going to go ahead. No, no, no. Please talk to Susie before you appoint. There may be something going on in Susie's life that you don't know, and she can't be the agent. Check in with your agent from time to time, especially now. Has something changed in their life? Are they still able to serve? I was working with a woman named V, and she had named her nephew, and about a year ago, and the nephew called me, I don't know why, but the nephew called me and said, I lost my job in a federal job, and I've lost that, and so I've got this great opportunity to work overseas. Do you think I should tell Aunt V? What do you guys think? I was like, is this a serious question? No. So I said, yes, let's have a conversation with Aunt V. She needs to know. And he said, well, I feel so bad because she was so happy and named me because the nephew lived on this side of the country. All the other relatives were in California. And he said, I just feel so bad. I said, well, give her the chance to choose someone else if she wants to. So check in with people. Question?
Thank you. What if you are single and have no family members who can do it, and most of your trusted friends are your age and older? Mm-hmm. Can you use a lawyer? Is this something that's common, or what should you look for?
Absolutely. You can use a lawyer. If you have a long relationship with your CPA, you could do that. I serve in that capacity for a lot of people, just for that very reason. Sometimes as you get older, you lose family members and friends, and so there are professionals who serve in that capacity, definitely. And you should always name a backup. Excuse me. One of my clients passed away last weekend, and her agent was in France. And so I was the backup, and so I got a call Saturday morning. And so I was able to talk with them, get things going, and then they were able to reach the agent in France, and then things continued on. But it was really nice that it was seamless. We didn't have to wait, that they could contact me, and we could just make things go on. Make sure you have the agent's current contact information, and provide the agent with information about yourself. If you want someone to act on your behalf, you should tell them about yourself, like where are your accounts, and what type of medical care you want. So you should have a conversation and let people know if you want them to serve, what exactly you'd like them to do for you, and what type of things what type of accounts or things that are important to you. You should tell your agent your health care preferences, what type of treatment you'd like. Tell them who your tax provider is, who's your investment advisor, and where your bank accounts are, where your insurance is located, your social security number, your charitable giving history, if you've got a pet, if you've got a plan for your pet, and most important, the password to your cell phone. Now, Lori and I have a client who's in this audience, and I'm not going to name that client, but this client could be giving this presentation because she has got all the things that we possibly need, Social Security, the whole bit, and she updates it at least twice a year and sends that information to me. So it's possible you can do it. Sir?
Besides, on the list there, what about the credit cards? Should you tell them what credit card you have?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The list is not entirely complete, and I want to show you. There's a couple of sources. This is called Memory Bank. It's a great big book. It's a little intimidating. I'm going to give a presentation with the creator. Her name is Kay Branson, and we're doing a presentation together in August. And we were talking about this, and she says, yes, this is a guide. She says, no one I know fills it all out. But it's a guide, and it has all kinds of things, like last doctor's visit, what happened there. And here's health insurance, online accounts, all sorts of different sections. So it's great. It's a good guide. And there's another book. I love the title. I'm dead. Now what? And it's the same sort of thing. It says, important information about my belongings, business affairs, and wishes. And so this is, again, lists and lists. I've just turned to a page that says, my dependents. Oops. Financial information. So you can create something like this yourself, or you can find books. They're all over. You can find these. Password to your cell phone is like the magic entryway, because if an agent finds a credit card or a bank account, then they can contact them, and they're going to get a reply that says change your password. But in order to change the password, you have to have the cell phone. So that really is great to have. So now I'm going to move into the other types of legal documents: the will or irrevocable trust, and beneficiary designations. So you all have a will, right? Everybody has a will. You know what that is. It's a document where you write down your wishes about where you want your investments, your assets to go upon your death, and you name someone to carry out your wishes. That's an executor, and it's effective when you pass away. A trust is similar. It's a document that you create during your lifetime, and you talk about how you want your assets invested and distributed upon your life, and then when you pass away. And the person who carries out your wishes is called a trustee. We lawyers don't want to use the same name for people who are managers because we want to confuse everyone. So executor and trustee are similar. They're managers, but the trustee is in a trust, and the executor is in a will. So the first thing in having peace of mind, read your documents. Sometimes you think your documents are old, it's been about 10 years, and you think you know what you wrote, but when you pull them out, it's not exactly what you thought. So take a look at them and make sure that they say what you think they say. Are your assets distributed as you want them to be? And have you remembered your charities, who you've given to during your lifetime? You can give to them when you pass away too. Selecting a fiduciary, which is the overall name for trustee or executor, it's just like selecting the agent that we talked about before. You want someone who's organized, who has the time to do the job. They have some experience, at least experience with finances. They're trustworthy. They're not a person that has trouble with their own finances. They can be a professional or a friend or family. What's really important is, especially in a trust, they have to be able to work with your beneficiaries. Sometimes they have to say no to the beneficiaries. I serve as a trustee for a woman who didn't have family. She came over from Germany with her husband, who was a soldier during World War II, and they had 2 sons. And neither of them are very good at money, and they're both in their 60s. And so she passed away, and before she died, she asked me to be the the trustee for the sons, sorry. Unfortunately, one son was in prison at the time, and the other had some addiction issues. So there was a lot to deal with there. So the son who was in prison is out, but he has a lot of issues. And Mom told me the most important thing is that she always wanted to have her son have a truck. And so, that's the sort of thing that we deal with. The other one, he's done really well, but they come to me all the time asking for money. And their requests are quite hysterical sometimes. And so I have to make some decisions because this money is supposed to last for the lifetime. And so when the one a beneficiary comes to me and says, I want this elaborate, $90,000 truck. I said, well, there's not enough money in the trust for that. Let's scale down and get a truck that's more in your price range and also more in your lifestyle. The other beneficiary has gone back to school. And so I said, yes, the trust can pay for a master's degree. That's great. Then he came to me and he said, I'm 62 years old and I'd like to get my doctorate. I said, your doctorate? Uh-huh. And so he has this idea he's going to go to school until he retires. So I said, that doesn't really, how much is that going to be? And it was $150,000. It was going to be 8 years. I said, that's going to take you to almost 70 years old. I said, the trust is not going to pay for that. The trust paid for the master's so that you could get more schooling and get a better job. And so now you need to get that better job. You can't just be, your mom didn't want you to be a student for the rest of your life until you retired. So those are some of the decisions that your trustees may have to make. So you have to choose wisely. And always name a successor. Help your fiduciaries. Don't make them hunt for information. Create one of those books like we just talked about so that they know where your information is and what your wishes are. Burial instructions. That's a big deal. You can pre-plan your funeral, or you can leave instructions. Do you want to be buried or cremated? Who do you want to be notified when you pass away? Your fiduciary is going to have to fill out your death certificate, and the death certificate asks for your parents' names. That's information that people don't usually talk about, so it's great to have that written down. Let your fiduciaries know where your legal documents are located. Take copies of the cards in your wallet. There's going to be the insurance card and your credit cards that you use most often. Birth certificates, marriage certificates, if there's a divorce certificate or decree. List of your debts and assets, list of your passwords, and then things that are unique to you. Things that are unique to you. I often find those in the storage unit. I found all kinds of things in a storage unit. Some we won't talk about. One was a gun. I wasn't expecting that. And in Virginia, there's sorts of rules about a gun. So I got access, I got the key, I go in, and the storage unit's completely empty. I said, this is so weird. What's going on? There's a little box in the corner. I said, what's this? I open it up, a handgun. Oh, close that up. So I had to get a gun dealer to come out with me the next time and get the gun and carry it, because I couldn't put it in my car. I can't, I'm not licensed, I can't do that. So it'd be great if my client had said, oh, and by the way, I have a gun in my storage unit. I would have been prepared. Yes?
Could you define fiduciary again?
Sure. She asked me to define fiduciary again. So fiduciary is the overall word for a trustee or executor. It also covers agent when we talked about agents before. So you would tell your executor or your trustee about these things about you. Sometimes when settling an estate, the personal property is what causes the most emotional issues with your beneficiaries. So if there are certain things that you want to give to someone special, write it down, sign it, write it down. And I'm talking about jewelry, clothing, household furnishings, paintings, any special collections. I have beneficiaries that come and say, Aunt June told me I could get her painting that hung over the mantle, but she didn't write it down. And sometimes an executor or trustee can make those gifts, but not always. So if there's something, also if you think there's something controversial, if there's the family hutch that both of your children want, just write down who you want it to go to. Another question?
In some cases, a fiduciary can have a lot of work to do. It can take a lot of time. They may have to travel. Are they entitled to any compensation?
Yes, they are. Fiduciaries are entitled to compensation. It's included in the document. And in Virginia, the compensation is set by a committee, a Supreme Court committee. And so oftentimes your documents will say reasonable fee, and then reasonable fee is defined in Virginia. Some of my clients want to have a specific dollar amount that they want to put in their document. But you are so right, it's a lot of work, and there should be a fee. If it's a family member, the family member can decide, I mean, your fiduciary then can decide if they want to take it or not. And sometimes family members don't, but a lot of times I have the conversation where they say, oh, I know I can take a fee, but I'm not going to. That's like when we first meet. A year later, they're calling me and saying, now what is that fee again? Because it's a lot of work. Now, the last type of legal document to talk about are assets that have beneficiary forms. And these are things like life insurance, your retirement accounts, annuities, or bank accounts where you signed a payable on death beneficiary form or a transfer on death beneficiary form. So you need to make sure that those are current. When you pass away, your executor or trustee will go down to the account holder, like the bank or whatever, and they'll provide a death certificate. And this would be true for like the life insurance. They might mail it to them. And then that account holder is not going to give information to your fiduciary. They're going to say, thank you very much for the death certificate. I will contact the beneficiaries that are listed. And so then the account holder, like the life insurance company or the bank, they will contact the beneficiaries that you named. And so it's important to make sure that their address is current. Oh, sorry. Did it the wrong way, sorry. And the account holder, they're not going to talk to anybody else but that named beneficiary. And a lot of people are confused about that. They say, well, I'm the executor, I should have rights. No, they don't. This is a relationship. The beneficiary form's like a contract. And so it's a contract that you're signing with the account holder. So check your beneficiary forms. Make sure they're accurate. And if you have an ex-spouse, make sure they're not named on your beneficiary form, because that could lead to a lawsuit, and we don't want to do that. It could also lead to consequences that you probably don't want. This is not a legal document, but I want to talk a little bit about joint accounts. There's two kinds of joint accounts. There's some joint accounts that are called right of survivorship. And the way that works is if one joint owner dies, then the surviving joint owner gets everything that was in the account, if it's real estate or a bank. But sometimes there are joint accounts without right of survivorship. Those are called tenants in common. And that works a little differently. If someone dies, then their portion of that account goes according to what their will says. It doesn't automatically go to the other joint owner. So if you've got a joint account, you should, one, make sure that your intent is exactly what you want. Do you want the joint owner to get the money in the account when you pass away, or do you want it to be to go according to what your will says? So just when you have a joint account, make sure that you know what happens upon your death. Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak to the tax implications of those two at all?
The tax implications. Are you talking about like inheritance tax or estate tax? So let's talk a little bit about estate taxes. You are so lucky to be in Virginia. This is such a great state to die in because there's no state estate tax, so we don't have to worry about that. So we talk about federal estate tax. Everybody is subject to it, but we all have an exemption. And the exemption right now is absolutely crazy. It's $13,999,000. But estate or inheritance tax does not come into play in this situation, because if you have a joint account, the gift would have, the assumption is that each owner put money in. And so the survivor, if it's without right of survivorship, then the survivor would take their portion, and the person who passed away would take their portion. If it's with survivorship, then that estate tax doesn't come into play then either, because the gift would have been made if it was, so let's say a situation where you are a parent and you add your child onto the account. That's kind of what you're probably thinking about. The gift occurred when you added them onto your account, because when you added them, then they had rights to all of the account. But don't do that. Don't add joint owners for convenience. A lot of my clients say that. Well, I've got 2 children. One lives in California, and my son's in California, my daughter's here. And just for convenience, I'm going to add my daughter to my checking account here so she can write checks if I'm not able to. Well, that is a big problem, because what if that daughter has a car accident? That daughter has to list all of her assets, and her assets include your account. And your account can be taken because she is sued in a car accident. Same thing with bankruptcy. If your daughter files bankruptcy, she has to list your account as her assets. That's not what you intended when you added her to your account. If she divorces, she has to list, yes, I have an account. It's with mom, but I have this account. And your account, half of it could go to her ex. So don't do that. What you can do instead is add your daughter as power of attorney. She's your agent. She can sign on your account as your agent. She has no ownership rights, but she can sign as your agent. So what else should you do to have peace of mind? Shred statements from closed accounts. Holy cow, don't keep those. It just confuses everybody. If you're gone, they find this old account from 2015, and it's from Wells Fargo. They're going to think, oh no, is there an account now? What happened? Shred those. You should shred your revoked will or power of attorney. Shred those. And like I said, tell your executor or your trustee about secrets that you might have. Like what's in that storage unit. Let them know. I've found all kinds of things in those storage units. I've also found out later that clients had children out of wedlock. It'd be great if I knew that before, because maybe there's going to be a lawsuit. Like maybe they're going to come forward and they're going to say, I need a portion of this estate. So it'd be great just to know all that in advance. And just tell if you're uncomfortable telling your executor or trustee, you could write it in an envelope and just say, in case of my death, please read this, just so they know in advance, so that before they get going and before they start settling things, they know that there's a potential conflict and they need to prepare for that. And update your estate plan if there's a wedding or a baby or a divorce in your family. Any questions? Yes.
When you talked about the reasonable fee for someone who takes care of a trust, how does the person know what that reasonable fee is? I mean, can they contact a lawyer to find out? Or?
Yes, they can contact a lawyer to find out. And there might be more detailed language in the document that explains what the reasonable fee is. Yeah. Oh, there's not?
Okay, and second question is, how does it work if you have a trust and you also have a power of attorney?
So a trust, when you have a trust, you create a trust, you fund your trust with certain assets. And you fund the trust by changing the assets from my name, Kim Fisk, to the Kim Fisk Trust. Now my trustee is in charge of all of those assets in that trust. So the trustee is in charge of that. The power of attorney agent would be in charge of other things. If you had any assets in your individual name, your agent under the power of attorney could manage those. But your agent under the power of attorney does other things too, like sign your tax return. Your trustee doesn't have the power to do that. And your agent can enter into contracts for you, can check you into the hospital and check you out. So they have different kinds of authorities. The trustee is really just a money manager for those assets in your trust.
I'm going to jump in and say something. I swear Kim and I aren't here to do, commercials for each other. But I also practiced law for a few years, and I feel very strongly about the importance of the things she's talking about. And so I wanted to share with you a couple of experiences, if you don't mind my interrupting the questions. I have a beloved aunt who's 101 years old, lives in Kansas City, where I'm from. And my purpose for this story is to remind you to think of who's coming next. Because she did all of her documents, right, and named my cousin and I. But, you know, I would try to get information or, you know, well, what, can we set this up online? Can we do this on your phone? No, I don't like that phone. I can't figure out how to use that phone. I'm not gonna, I don't know, I can't do that, so I'm not interested in doing that. So recently, when she was moved to assisted living for the first time at 101, I had to make some changes with Social Security. Well, because she changed her address. Well, this was when I was literally on the phone for over 2 hours and then had to verify her. She's blind, so she can't read to give you the information. And she now has dementia. So when they ask the last address, she can't give it. So it really would have been helpful. You know, I had to mute the phone. I had to cheat. I had to mute the phone and give her the answer and then unmute the phone so we could do the change of address on Social Security. So if there's somebody who's helping you, help them help you. If by, you know, considering, you know, thinking of your own security, considering having things set up electronically and sharing passwords. It's really very helpful. The other thing I would say is just to make sure that everybody in your family is included in all of these, in your thinking. Because if you have done, I just ran into a situation where, you know, the father left the house to the daughter, but he's married to someone who's not the daughter's mother. She did not do estate planning. He died, and the mother would want it to go to the daughter, but she didn't write it down. And there's another mentally unbalanced person who lives in Europe who might have a claim on that house. Now the daughter needs long-term care, and title to the house is unclear. So, I mean, these things are, you know, you can spend your life building all your wealth, right? And making all the money in the world in the market. But if you haven't planned for how all this happens at the end, you know, as you get older and you need help, it really has a big impact. So lock those things down and you know, talk with your lawyer, you know, every couple of years to make sure it's all locked down and check all those beneficiary designations and all of those things that Kim's talking about.
Question?
About the executor fee, is that income taxable to the executor?
It sure is. It is. It's taxable to the executor. They're going to claim it as a fee that they receive for professional services.
One has a will that was drawn up in another state. Is it valid in Virginia?
Yes, it is. It's valid. If it's valid in the state in which it was drafted, then it's valid in Virginia. It's always a good idea to have someone review it, though, just to make sure that it still meets your needs and, you know, it should just still be reviewed.
And you said that a trust manages your financial assets. Do you mean that the trustee has power to buy and sell?
Yes.
Functionally, how that works is, because I'm the one that manages the account, there has to be paperwork done. You know, the legal power exists, but, you know, prove it to me, right? So, like, my mom had estate planning documents, right, and had a trust set up, and it still, and it was, the account was with me. It still took time for all the paperwork to get processed and everything turned in. So all these things are complicated. The trustee has the authority to buy or sell, but you have to prove it to my financial institution and have the right documents and the right signatures. Does that make sense? Yeah. Don't be overwhelmed.
Just a couple of comments. Your reference to different states. I found that every time I go to my lawyer to fiddle with my trust in some way or my will in some way, the state has changed. The state plans have changed. It really seems to me
to warrant checking every once in a while with your lawyer to make sure that your state is still, you know, up to date with the state of Virginia. And the other thing is that something that people don't always know is that when you die here at Goodwin, your apartment is immediately locked, assuming you live alone. The apartment is immediately locked and nobody can get in there except your executor. So you have to have that executor, power of attorney, whatever it is, but otherwise your apartment's locked and that's it.
That's a really good point. And talking about the changes in the law, that's true. In Virginia, I think it was in 2012, we repealed some old laws that related to trusts and wills, and we had some new ones come into effect. And there are new ones that come along, every year. So it is good. Your document is generally grandfathered, but it depends on what the issue is. So it is good to have it reviewed. And then tax laws change too. So some good points. Thank you.
My main question is what documents should be kept in a safe deposit box and what should be more readily retrievable right away? And of course, it also comes into account if the apartment is locked on, and if you have a box of things there, but they have to get to it. You have to wait for the executor, who happens to be a local attorney, which helps. But if she's not there, then the backup person is in Oregon. So,
So I think also with Goodwin House that there's a next of kin or a certain person that's named who can go into the apartment. So I know that I've served that way and I've been executor and I haven't had to wait to have executor papers in order to go in. So I think that maybe is part of your information that you fill out with Goodwin House. And then where should you keep your documents? I recommend that the will, if you have a will, it should be kept in your safe deposit box because then you have complete control over that. In Virginia, people can go into your safe deposit box to search for an original document. You could add someone on your safe deposit box if you want, but you don't have to. So the other documents, I like to have them in the safe deposit box too, but you're right, readily accessible. So letting people know where they are, it'd be great to keep them all together in one box at your desk. It's great to let people know where they are.
I'm also a pretty big believer in readily accessible. Somebody will bring you a copy of a document that's not sufficient to the purpose. Kim was also talking about powers of attorney and talking to your bank or financial institution about their form. I don't practice law, so I'm not going to go through people's power of attorney and see if it looks like it's, up to date and everything. But I don't want to be in the position where I'm arguing with somebody or going back and forth with somebody in the legal department about your North Carolina POA that was done 12 years ago. So routinely, I will give people the internal form to say, who do you want me to be able to talk to? Who do you want to be able to take action? So be thinking about things like that, just planning ahead. Because none of us knows, when we're going to have a trip and fall and need somebody to do some things for it. So just think about all the different relationships you have. And if the people that you trust are empowered to do the things you need them to do.
And Lori's talking about a limited power of attorney. So each of your financial institutions have their own document that their legal department has reviewed and written, and you can sign one of those, and that allows the agent that you name on that document to deal with those accounts at that place. So Lori at Wells Fargo has a limited power of attorney. The person signs it, and that agent can deal with Lori just on that account. And that's a great way to go, too.
It's not a substitute for, it's kind of an addition to. For people that I'm their primary financial contact, it can be an important thing.
The power, as I understand it, the power of attorney is only good if you're still alive.
That is true.
So that's not sufficient. We need more than a power of attorney. We need someone who's a fiduciary.
So,
in those other terms.
really good point. So the power of attorney is named as your agent who could act on your behalf, but if you're gone, they can't act either. So the power of attorney ceases upon death, and that's when either the executor or the trustee takes over. The trustee can step in and serve for you immediately because the trust is a contract. The executor has to get their power from the court. So the executor can't step in and start working for you until they've gone to probate and gotten the formal authorities from the court, naming them or appointing them as executor.
Okay, just looking at the clock, why don't we have one more question, if there's anything left? Okay. Thank you, Kim and Lori. This was absolutely terrific. And thank all of you. The questions really helped, I think, guide the conversation and what's relatable and pertinent to all of us, here at Goodwin Living. So thank you for being such active participants. Two things on your way out. Like I said, we do have some printouts of the presentations. If we run out before you get one and you're interested, if you want their contact information, reach out to me. I'll be happy to provide that to you. And the second thing is, in the back of the room, we do have, I would call it, if this were after lunch, some desserts, but it's before lunch, so we'll say they're cookie appetizers. Feel free to grab one or a drink on your way out. And again, thank you all for coming today, and I hope you have a terrific afternoon.
Yes, you did. Yes, and you measured. Yes. Yes. Wonderful. I'm singing.
That's okay. Just tell me you don't have a gun in there. Yes, exactly. You know what? It's I know.
It's just fine.
I'm glad. Oh, June, it's so good to see you.